ready, right? Okay, if we can start going, that would be great. We apologize for our lateness. We were just dealing with an item that took a whole lot longer than we anticipated, so we apologize for that. So we have 7 consent items. Does someone want to move them? Moved by Councillor Fernandez. Councillor Guzzola, you have one you would like taken out?
I was going to move them, but I have a question on 1, 2, and 7.
Councillor Fernandez.
I have a question on number 7 as well.
Councillor Singh.
A quick question for number 5.
Councillor Yanetsky.
Number 2.
Okay, so we will deal with number 3, 4, and 6. Those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And then to move out of consent, 1, 2, 5, and 7. Those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. All right, we'll start with number 1. Councillor Guzzola. This is to do with the Kiwanis. I need you to thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to know whether the city receives anything for this agreement that they give to the Kiwanis, or to the Kiwanis Club. Is it something that's tendered out, or is there a little more detail on it? That's all.
Ms. Keelan?
Through the chair, the Kiwanis Club has operated the concession at the park for decades, and they've done a great job at it. So we, based on the naming of the park, the understanding that they've been volunteering and doing this as a community project, that we have not had any discussion about tendering it out to any other group. And I think the second part of the question was the budget or any monetary exchange. Is that your question?
Well, no, you've actually covered it. I was just, and I'm sure I was sort of waiting to hear from you. I'm sure the Kiwanis Club does a lot of things for the park, and that's what I was just wondering, whether you would elaborate a little bit on it, because it is a source of revenue.
So do you want Denise to...
No, we can move on.
Okay.
I'll deal with the next one.
Councillor Schneider on this one specifically?
Just wanted to get to confirm that the Kiwanis Club use what they raise here to give back to the city in forms of different projects and community work that they do.
Ms. Keelan?
Through the chair, absolutely. The Kiwanis Club that we're dealing with does a number of community projects that are too numerous to list out, but yes, they give back.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, there's no more questions on that one. It's been moved. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Now we'll go to number 2, which is the noise exemption for Oktoberfest for their various locations. Councillor Guzzola?
No, I just had, I said, what about Lot 42? It's a venue this year for Oktoberfest, and I don't see them on the list.
I think it says location to be determined, so I think it's the 4th on the list, but I can look to Gloria if you have any.
Through the chair, I apologize. I hadn't, that hadn't been identified to me specifically for Lot 42, but I could get information back to council before the council date just to clarify that.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that they're included in that. That's all. Thanks.
Councillor Yanetsky?
Yeah, that was one of my questions as well. But on the other hand, also the Transylvania Club operating out of the Stampede Corral, that's closing down, I think, in another month or so. So are they going to another location?
Through the chair, yes, I was just informed of that recently, so I'm not sure if they're making if they're going to have an alternative location to go to, but I'll confirm that as well for council.
So that can be found out before the next council meeting,
Yes,
hopefully?
correct.
Okay.
Okay, there's no further questions on that. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Number 5, Councillor Singh.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And Ms. McNeil, the report states that very few complaints are received. Just want to bring to your attention, I think I've done in the past, there are some concerns with neighboring properties in the back where garbage is either stored there for a prolonged period of time or just the disarray of the state of the rear of the property after the event. So I would hope that we could take some proactive measures to ensure that doesn't happen again this year.
Through the chair, I'll document that and ensure that we follow up.
Perfect, thank you.
That's all the questions for that one. Those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And then number 7. Councillor Fernandez.
Yes, thank you. So I see Mr. Golan is here. This is on the stormwater report card. Just looking at page 7-3, where it talks about the different ratings and the different parameters. When it's at a fair, fair rating, to marginal, is there an opportunity for us to reverse some of that? And what would we be doing? Is that through our whole stormwater management implementation plan?
Mr. Golan?
Through the chair, yes, that's correct. We've prioritized all the subwatersheds based on need, and the intention is to focus our efforts and resources on those in highest need to bring them higher in their rating.
So I was looking at, and of course I always focus on Strasburg Creek because it's in my ward for the most part, and Councillor Galloway-Seelock's ward as well. There is a change in it says there was no change in the dry 2010 and dry 2015, but there was, and additionally in the wet, with the chemical parameters, they're both worse. So is it through our plan that we're hoping to improve the ratings of these, or is there something we can do in the interim?
So that is correct. We are doing work currently in the Strasburg subwatershed. So most recently we completed the retrofit of Pond 66, which is just off of Trillium Drive, and we're working on the design now for Pond 65, and 61 is also scheduled for the next couple of years. So between those 3 retrofits, those are all retrofits to take those ponds from quantity-only control to include quality control as well, which we would hope to see positive results in the monitoring from that work being completed.
Okay. More recently, I had a report from a resident who was walking along the creek that runs in behind Morrow Meadow with the work that was being done around Strasburg Road, that there was what they thought was a bloom, a flush of sludge. This may not have been picked up in that monitoring. Will we be doing, I know I've spoken to Mr. Spear about this, will we be looking for some of that possibility, some of that silt and sand that may have escaped from that construction site?
We will, as part of the construction process, there will be an inspector there to ensure that erosion controls are in place as per the intended erosion and sediment control design. And there's monitoring going on quite a bit around the Strasburg area through the snow storage facility, through the citywide monitoring program, and the region is also doing some monitoring there. So anything that comes up like that, it would be good for us to obviously be aware of that and then act on it.
Okay. So one more question. It talks about riparian and shading of our creeks. As we see people encroach more and more into the backs of some of these creeks where their properties back onto woodlots, and they start encroaching into those areas, we see the plant material and woodlots start to diminish and decrease. can we do one, try to get a stronger message out to people who think it's okay to dump their grass and their leaves and whatever else they're dumping back there. But also, can we engage in the public to possibly replant in some of those areas so that we can build up that shade, which is so critical to some of these creeks to keep that cool temperature?
So through the chair, when we're made aware of those issues, we do try to contact the residents and inform them. They may be unaware of where the property limit is, to avoid that type of thing from happening, from vegetative cover being removed from water courses and dumping that could potentially plug outlets and that sort of thing. So as those issues arise, we do address them. With respect to encouraging planting, we do have work planned as part of our watercourse rehabilitation projects, Idlewood being a big one going into construction this year. I think we could discuss more about how we could partner with residents. It's not currently something that we're working on, but I'd be happy to look into that further.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you very much.
Councillor Gazzola?
My question's been answered. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Yanetsky?
Yeah, thank you. I'm a little puzzled that in the analysis that we have here that pertain to 2010 and 2015, dry and wet analysis, and this report is sort of like an annual report card or a 5-year report card. And I'm just wondering, and I'm looking at one particular case as the Henry Sturm Greenway, which is in my area, along with Phil Singer. That work has been done, but the information seems to be, the latest information seems to be 3 years old.
Through the chair, there is a reason for that. This report, it talks about both the 5-year report card, so every 5 years we produce an overall report for the city comparing to the 5 previous years. And then every year we do annual monitoring as well, which it's all very detailed in the report, which is available. So what you're seeing here is really, it's a combination of 2 reports. So it's the 5-year report card, and there's a very brief discussion on the 2017 monitoring results.
So I know Phil Singer Park was just redone back a year or 2 ago. So there's no analysis for that yet in terms of how the effect has happened yet, has it?
Actually, there is. It's not discussed in this report, but there's extensive monitoring that we've done there as part of our habitat banking credits agreement that we have with the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. And I'd be happy to share that information with you directly. But I can say that the results have been very positive, where there were no fish and very poor water quality when it was just a concrete-lined channel. We're seeing quite a productive fish community there now, and so the intended results have certainly transpired, and we have another year of detailed monitoring that we're completing there to get the rest of the credits for the work that we've done from the DFO.
Oh, okay, good, thanks.
That's all the questions. Those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. All right. Before we get into the sidewalk infill, we need to, we're going to deal with this after if it passes, but it came to our attention late last week that we were going to add an item or attempt to add an item to this agenda, and it would be the Regional Transportation Master Plan Update Report. We need to waive notice in order to do that, so if somebody wants to move that, moved by Councillor Singh. Before we even talk, we have to waive notice, and that's unanimous, is that right? Or two-thirds? Two-thirds? Okay. Those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay, so we will add that to the agenda, but we'll do so after the sidewalk infill. And there will be a 10-minute presentation from regional staff. I don't believe there's any action required. I think it's just an update for us before it goes to regional council. Okay, so with that, we're going to move on to the sidewalk infill through roadway reconstruction. There's no presentation from staff, but we currently have 7 delegations who actually are all, for my understanding, the same street. So we'll start with John Scott. It's my understanding you want to speak separate from Kathy, is that right?
That's right.
Okay. I believe it's the Fairmont. Oh, hold on, everyone, 1 second. Go ahead, Councillor Singh.
No, my apologies. I should have keyed in early for this item. For one of the streets, Mauser Street, my parents own property in the street, so I would declare conflict for that portion of it. Thank you.
You might have to remind me at the end, but...
Okay.
All right, go ahead.
So I'm here with a group of our neighbors. We're very concerned about the proposal to put sidewalks down both sides of our road. And we conducted a separate survey, which basically mirrors the one that was done by the city. However, we obtained significantly improved results. So we received a 92% response from the neighborhood, 22 of the 24 affected properties. So I'm speaking purely of the property owners and not the area residents, which is another thing that will be discussed. We had 2 non-respondents who were rental units and difficult to track down in the short time we had to do this in. But of the 22 responses we did get, 20 respondents, 91% opposed to sidewalks on period. We had 2 respondents, or 9%, that were in favor of sidewalks on one side. I spoke to both of these residents, and they were very in favor of sidewalk on one side, so that as a concession to the problems they knew would cause their neighbors. We have 0 respondents who want sidewalks on both sides. So I've submitted that survey, and you can take the results from that.
I have a copy, so I'll just pass it around.
The second thing that I want to talk about is the analysis of the report that the city put out to us. I did obtain the report from Barry. I did have some problems with the way the report has been analyzed. There is the use of 520 area residents in the city survey who do not own property on Fairmont Street completely overwhelms the wishes of the 24 property owners. So basically the 24 owners have essentially no say. If you look at the results, you'll see that even with 100% no from the property owners, this still carries forward. I also have a problem with the decision to call this area Priority 2. I did get a hold of the point system from the city and did an analysis and some measurements on our own, and I calculated at 30 points, which puts us at a Priority 3 zone. The descriptions of these priority zones actually correspond very closely to what our neighborhood is like. So Priority 3, and I'm sure some of you know this, the roadway is typically a local roadway with limited connections to transit, school, or significant destinations. The main part of the point system, where we pull the most points from, is the existence of the high school in the corner. If you take a look at the actual traffic to the high school, it's very, very low. It actually, the only traffic that would originate through our section in the neighborhood to the high school would be coming from a 200-meter section of the cul-de-sac on Sheldon Road. So it is a bit skewed in the sense of how is it actually being used. Also, I have in looking at the decision that was indicated by the report to put sidewalks down both sides, you clearly see that this was the exact one thing that the residents, the property owners, did not want. So I have to think of why the city is proposing in opposition to the wishes of the property owners. I want to move on to the effect on parking spaces. I did some measurements based on basically criteria for city parking spaces, and determined that from 9 to 13 homes out of the 24 will feel a reduction to a single parking space. This includes our own space, which is we invested heavily in order to get out of a parking situation, and now we find that after a fairly large investment in the neighborhood, we'll be back to a single space again. Very disappointing.
If I can just ask you to wrap up.
And it's good timing, because I think that kind of, so I have more information, but and you're welcome to have the report that I have, but that is the gist of it, of the section that I'm going to talk about.
Okay. That's great. Thank you. Questions of Mr. Scott? Councillor Marsh?
Thank you, Mr. Scott, for your presentation. I wanted to ask how many addresses would have a reduction down to one spot that I didn't catch what you said.
I'm sorry. From 9 to 13. It's variable because I don't know how you're defining this. You also have to keep in mind that we don't want to get out of our cars and have to kind of crank along the side of the house in order to get into the door. Mm-hmm. So, but on the fairly conservative estimates that I used, it's from 9 to 13 houses, up 24, that would have their driveways directly affected, and down to one spot.
Are they along one side of the street, even or an odd, or the odd side?
They're primarily on, so stating it as even and odd, most of the largest percentage will be affected on the odd side of the street, where the yards are generally a bit shorter. And in fact, of the two respondents who indicated that they would like a sidewalk on one side, they recognized that this would be a problem for the neighbors, and actually each of them independently said, we would like it on our side. And one of them actually said she would not want it at all, except for she has some children. And definitely there is an advantage too in that case.
Okay, thank you.
Question, Councillor Yunetsky?
Yeah, as presented here in this report, and we at council have three choices. No sidewalks, sidewalks on one side, or sidewalks on both sides. It's one of the decisions we have to make. With sidewalks on one side, is there any preference as to which side it would be preferred? Although I gather from the analysis that people don't want sidewalks on both sides, so they probably don't want it on their side. So,
well, you're going to get me in the spot here, because basically most people don't want it on either side. But as I indicated, the two people in the survey that wanted sidewalks were on the even side of the street.
On the even side.
Yes, they do have and the shorter yards are on the odd side in general.
Now, in our report, I don't know which is the even or the odd. Is the even closer to King Street, or is the evens the sides closer to the expressway?
Closer to the expressway.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Councillor Gazzola?
Yeah, how long have you lived there?
We've been there for 22 years, 24 years.
How about the majority of your neighbors?
I'm sorry?
How about the majority of your neighbors? Are they new to the area?
It's an older, the population is probably, I'm probably a good representation of the population, so you can see me. Most of them have been there for, in that area, a time. Some of them are now are here that will speak, have been there much longer. I know Jim, who's here, his family was there, so he's second generation on the street. At least, I don't even know that, but he's at least second generation. And I think that it's a very well-established neighborhood. Yeah, and the turnover is low. We don't get a lot of houses shifting.
Yeah. Is there a lot of activity on the street?
Not a lot. It's mostly people walking their dogs, and again, most of these people are the neighbors that we're talking about. So most of the traffic is actually to the houses of the residents that have responded in this survey.
Are you aware of any accidents or problems over the years?
I've never, in the time that I've been there, I've never heard of a problem, and I believe that one of our neighbors is going to make the same point, that there has, within her knowledge, and she's been there many years as well, there's never been traffic accidents.
Would you accept a compromise being sidewalks on one side of the street?
I'm not, we've only had this survey results in our hands for roughly about a week. I know that it may seem like longer to the committee because I know this has been going on, but basically we've had a week to respond. So my point here is that I don't speak for the group. I don't have the authority to say that I'll accept the compromise for the group.
Can I ask you for yourself, would you accept the compromise? I don't mean to put you.
Because I won't, I'd rather not answer that because I've gone down and talked to many of these people and I feel that they have some trust in what I might say, and I don't want it to seem self-serving.
Thank you.
Okay.
Councillor Schneider?
Thank you, Chair Galloway Seelock. I'm familiar with the neighborhood. I grew up on Edmund Road, so I'm just wondering if you see any problems with people trying to walk possibly from Sheldon Avenue down Fairmont to get to Montgomery Park. I'm thinking of parents with kids, things like that.
You have to consider what the routing is that you're talking about. There are, if you're walking down Fairmont, then it's most likely that you're either coming from the cul-de-sac on Sheldon, which is the part I talked about, 200 meters, or you're coming from the section of road we're talking about. So in talking to the neighbors, they're very emphatic about this, that there has been they're very comfortable walking on the street. They have no problems with the traffic. They don't really understand why we're considering this. I know that some people do, but in a gut form as to why is the city doing this now after in such an old area, it's kind of a hard thing to understand why the neighborhood is going to change or might change. So the basic answer to your question is that the people there feel perfectly safe walking down the street or riding down the street. I ride a bicycle myself. I actually feel a little more threatened on Sheldon than I do on Fairmont because Sheldon has been narrowed down. Sheldon was redone last year, and they did cut the width down a bit. Now that when you're on a bike, and no bicycle routes, when you're on a bicycle, that forces you to be in as tight as you can be. And on Fairmont, it currently is more open and more comfortable, to be honest, to ride on it. So in terms of pedestrian or bicycle traffic, it's a very safe neighborhood, and nobody that lives there feels threatened in any way.
I just, would want to ask, just, I'm not trying to be confrontational here, but, because Montgomery Park is a neighborhood park, so there'll be, people possibly from Sheldon Avenue and maybe Clive Road that would want to walk up Fairmount
So-
to get to Montgomery
So
Park.
to get to Montgomery Park, if you were to choose to go down Fairmount, which you don't have to do, it's pretty much equal distance if you go down Sheldon and go to,
Brentwood?
sorry? Brentwood, right. It's pretty much equal distance, and that's all sidewalked. And there's no hill. And actually, that is the route that we've observed many people that are going, because the flow is more towards the core of the city, and we're against the expressway, so everything goes out. Now, the only case where you really go down Fairmount would be if you were going either to someone's house that was on it, or if you happen to be going all the way down to Montgomery Park. We don't see a lot of traffic doing that. Yeah. And I've used the park myself, not so much lately because my kids are quite a bit older now, but we used to go there to the swings and stuff. And they were very, there was never any feeling that we were in any danger. And things haven't really changed. It's a very stable neighborhood.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, John. There's no more questions you've asked. Go ahead.
Just one more question. Is on Fairmount, is this the only street that doesn't have sidewalks? Do all the other streets in the area have sidewalks, or are there?
That's correct, except for Clive. I believe that Clive got an exemption from sidewalks when it was last redone, but in the area, part of Clive. Yes, so part of Clive does not have sidewalks, but basically all the streets that are running, and I get the directions a bit confused, but I'll call it east-west, have sidewalks. And north-south, Fairmount would be the one that doesn't, and it's on the outside edge.
Right, okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, that's all the questions. Thank you. Kathy, were you going to make a presentation as well? Okay, go ahead. It's your turn.
The one thing that I wanted to emphasize is the local nature of the traffic. It's not a heavily traveled area. In that whole area between Weber and the expressway, all those streets were cut off when the expressway was made, so the streets don't really go anywhere. The only foot traffic or car traffic are people who live in that neighborhood, by and large. Mostly the people who go to Eastwood High School access it from Weber Street. And some staff, I think, drive down Brentwood because that drives practically right into their parking lot. So that's one clarification that I wanted to make. Particularly with regard to the priority rating, that's another, just a clarification that we would see it as more a priority 3 neighborhood than priority 2. The second thing is specifically with our property, and I know other people will say the similar thing, if we had a sidewalk that used the city allowance, because our house was built in 1948 before there were these sorts of things and policies, as were a few other houses on the street, that the sidewalk would be within 10 feet of our front door, it would just be very stressful for us. It would eliminate the garden that we have and the only sunny spot in the property. It would, and as well as some other landscaping, and we find that quite unacceptable. As far as we know, there would be trees having to be removed. It looked to us like there would be about 5 large trees, 4 medium-sized trees along the length of the street that would have to be removed to accommodate sidewalks on both sides. There are a number of very elderly people on our sidewalk. One woman who cares for a husband who is disabled, and they would all have a great deal of difficulty with the snow removal that's involved with having sidewalks. There's other people I think will speak to the landscaping disruption, and that would be problematic. There are apparently some retainer walls that would have to be built, not on our property, but on a couple of properties down the street. and other people, I think, will they find that they'd have difficulty knowing what to do with their snow removal. Yeah, I think that that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Oh, did you want to see pictures of what I'm talking about as far as the landscaping disturbance and so on? Okay. So this is our property looking from the corner of Sheldon and Fairmont, and that just demonstrates the space between our front door, which you can, and the roadway. If that's the garden that would be eliminated, and there's about 2.5 to 3 feet of grass between the garden and the corner of the street. The street also gets wider along by our property as it approaches the intersection. I don't think that's right side up. I think it's sideways.
There you go.
I think, well, that's down the street. That's, that's actually Bill and Teresa's, yeah. But I think they'll probably speak to that. It's similarly close to, the sidewalk would also be about the same distance from their house. Yeah.
Okay, is that all the pictures?
That's it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for your presentation. There are no.
Did you want to show another picture? Did you want to put Jim's pictures? Go ahead. This is a neighbor who asked us to speak on his behalf and show pictures of his out in front of his property where he has a retaining wall presently. And he's concerned that if a sidewalk goes in, this is where the snowplow presently puts the snow, that essentially it's piled 2 or 3 feet up against his retaining wall, and if there's a sidewalk there, he's concerned that he'd have a great deal of difficulty managing where to put the snow.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much for your presentation. There do not appear to be any questions for you, so thank you. Up next, we have Stella and Stephen Elliott.
Hello. My name's Stella Elliott. I live on Fairmount Road, and I've lived on Fairmount Road for 19 years. I do not want sidewalks installed. My property will be negatively impacted by sidewalk installation. I'll lose 2 parking spaces, 3 trees, and my gardens. Our neighborhood has lost many trees due to previous road projects, the ash beetle. I think saving every tree should be a priority. Also, and I'll refer to the point made earlier that our street really does not have a lot of pedestrian traffic. And I'd like to just bring up one other point that recently when Sterling Ave had road infrastructure completed, no sidewalks were installed in front of those homes. Sterling Ave homes have more pedestrian traffic due to the proximity to Shepherd School and St. Anne's School, but they were able to avoid having sidewalks put in there. I also feel that many people who received the survey were not directly affected when we've had other projects done in our neighborhood, specifically the Clive Street project. I live 4 houses in from Clive on Fairmount Road, and I didn't get a survey, but people who live quite far away in our neighborhood from the actual street that's affected got surveys, and they're weighted apparently the same as what the residents of the street, their voting or their results from that are voted equally, and I don't think that's fair. And that's, I guess that's all the points I have to make right at this time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. There is one question for you, Councillor Marsh.
Sure. Thanks, Ms. Elliott, for sharing your comments. Just a couple questions. So are you on the even side or the odd side?
I'm on the even side.
The even side. All right. And you're going to lose 2 parking spaces if the sidewalk?
Yeah, from what I could determine, it looked like I would lose 2 parking spaces.
That's what it looks like, right. And so how many would you have remaining? Would it be?
I would have 2 remaining.
Okay, so you currently have 4. Okay. All righty. And the trees, 3 trees, are they?
I believe I'll lose 3 trees, yeah.
Are they mature trees, or how would you characterize?
The city planted the maple. I couldn't tell you. It's not a mature tree. I wouldn't call it a mature tree.
Okay.
And then I have one that was supposed to be a dwarf tree that ended up not being a dwarf tree. So that would be an Alberta spruce, I guess. And then there's another one similar to that that's a taller tree. And they'd be impacted one way or the other, even if it's not removed, but they would definitely be impacted by the sidewalk.
And those are mature or not mature? They're
that one's
medium.
mature. It's tall. Yeah.
All righty. And so I wanted to address the point made, if I may, just about Sterling Avenue. So that decision was made prior to the current sidewalk infill policy being adopted, but also it was made due to one of the factors that wasn't able to be mitigated. So my understanding, and this was before my time on council, that it was site-specific impacts where there were a couple of driveways that were going to be so short they wouldn't even have one.
I think you're talking about Clive, right? Not Sterling?
Sterling by Simeon.
Okay. All right. Sorry.
Anyway, yeah. Yes, I'm talking about.
Okay, I was under the impression
Sterling.
that they didn't get sidewalks because of some trees.
On Simeon, there were.
On Sterling.
Okay.
On Sterling.
Anyway, I don't want to go on the back and forth, but I can share later a bit more about that.
Sure.
All righty. So thank you for sharing.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you. That's all the questions. Stephen, are you coming up separately? Okay.
Hello. Basically, most of my comments have already been addressed already. I'm just here to say that I agree with everybody, what they've had to say so far, and I just don't want sidewalks installed.
Okay. Thank you very much. Up next will be Bill Marks. Yeah. Okay. Yep. No problem. Samantha Holmes.
Hello. So I wasn't planning on speaking today, but I did want to address a couple specific concerns that my husband and I have. Just to go back a little bit, we moved in onto Fairmount Road back in October. We bought the house in July. We actually lived on Edmund Road for 9 years prior to that, so we moved 1.5 kind of streets away. So things we loved about our neighborhood and why we wanted to stay in it was mostly the mature feel to it, the yards that we get, the parking, and just the feel of the neighborhood. So we have 3 spots for parking, and if the sidewalk goes in, we will be down to 1. We have 2 small children, so we have a minivan and a car, and at this point we're not entirely sure where we would park our vehicles. We do have a 1-car garage, but the house needs a lot of work, and the garage is currently set up as a workshop for my husband so that he can renovate our house. Had we known about the sidewalks going in, it would have definitely been a deal breaker for us to buy this house, even though it was our dream to find a 4-bedroom house in our price range in our current neighborhood that we wanted to stay in. The other thing for us specifically, and I know other people have alluded to it a little bit, but I think it'll be a huge thing for us, is the way we have a raised bungalow, and the way our driveway is, and the way our front yard is, we're at the top of the hill. And we have a large amount of those very large landscaping stones that are around our house. if we have to, we're not sure exactly if the sidewalk will just butt up to those rocks. It's hard to tell by the stakes. So it might just butt straight up against them. I'm not sure if they'll have to even be moved to install it. But if we have to widen our driveway to get another spot, we're looking at a cost of anywhere, I would estimate, from $10,000 to $20,000 to re-landscape the front of our yard to provide that parking for ourselves. I did want to allude to the questions as well about the foot traffic in terms of getting to Montgomery Park. As I said, I lived on Edmund Road for 9 years, and I have 2 small children. I walked every single day to Montgomery Park, and I never once walked down Fairmount. Not once. So actually very rarely had ever walked on that street prior to moving there, even though I walked our dogs, walked our kids every single day that we lived on Edmund Road. I think that was it. Yeah, so just for us, it's about parking. We'll lose a large tree, a very mature tree, actually. I don't know how old it is, but it's likely been there since the house was built, which I think was in 1968, but don't quote me on that. So that tree will be lost, and we'll lose shade, we'll lose somewhere for our kids to play, and we'll lose a large tree. And I believe that's it. And I just wanted to draw the attention that there is a significant amount of us here. As we know, there are 24 property owners on the street, and I count 10 individuals here, and this meeting is taking place at 3 o'clock on a Monday, and we received notice of that a week ago. So we have all made arrangements to either leave work, find childcare. I'm trying to find someone to pick up my children right now, and I'm sure there's other people that would be here if they had the flexibility to be here. So I think it's very significant how many of us are here today.
Thank you. Thank you very much for taking the time. There's no questions, but thank you. Robert?
Hello. I just wanted to let you know that my family has owned this property on Fairmount Road since 1984, and I've lived there for a number of those years myself. I have one of the homes that has the retaining wall, and there was some pictures that were shown about where we would put snow. So this is a major concern for me. One of the pictures is actually one of my homes, the stones. I'm not really interested in a compromise where the sidewalk would go on the opposite side. I think it's an unnecessary improvement. And everything that has already been mentioned, I agree with it 100%. That's it.
Okay. Thank you very much for coming and making a presentation. There are no questions. And the last person I have registered is Adina Gardner.
Hi. For myself, I've lived at the corner of Clive and Fairmount for 24 years now, and there's never been any problems as far as accidents, and I'm right on the corner. As far as accidents, people having problems as far as walking down Fairmount at all, it would impact me as far as snow goes. I know sometimes that's not, but with a lot of the elderly people in our neighborhood, if we're trying to keep people in their houses, you know, as far as they're getting older, trying to put sidewalks in and stuff like that, it just doesn't work. So I'm talking for one side of the street and the other side. There's a lot of elderly people, so snow shoveling is a big deal in our area. There's no essential services within Fairmount. There's no churches, there's no bus stops, there's no malls, no community centers. As we've talked before, as far as the park and the school goes, you'd come off Weber Street to actually essentially go to those places. We've already talked about the trees and stuff like that. Property value is another thing as far as I'm concerned, right? And obviously everybody else. To put a sidewalk in that's not needed. Okay, the aging population. Once again, too, putting sidewalks in, if you're getting elderly people to try and do this, we're actually essentially putting them at risk as far as like breaking hips, falling, that sort of thing, when it's not necessary, it's not needed. More heart attacks, so that sort of thing. I'd like to see them, if the money's going to go somewhere like fixing Mackenzie, like there's so many other places that need the money and things to be restored, than to put sidewalks down Fairmount. And I walk my dogs twice a day and use that street twice a day, and I've never had a problem. So, as I said, property taxes, that sort of thing. And everything else pretty much has been said already.
Okay. Thank you very much for your presentation and for coming in. There doesn't appear to be any questions, so thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you.
That's all the delegations that I have that are registered. So we will move on to questions of staff, but before we do so, I just want to thank all of you for coming and giving your presentation. We'll ask questions of staff, and then we will make a decision today in committee, but it will come back to council in 2 weeks from now at a 7 o'clock meeting, so you can have another say at that time, or bring out the residents who weren't able to attend today. But I did want to also just say and appreciate the fact that you didn't come up and just keep repeating the same thing. You said someone already said it and you moved on, and that's much appreciated. So thank you for that, being cognizant of the time today. So we appreciate you being here and doing that. So Councillor Marsh, questions of staff?
Thank you. Yeah, I also really appreciate that all of these neighbors, almost half the street, came out. So, and if for those who are needing to leave early, it's not rude. You can leave early. But of course you're going to want to stay to see what happens, and that's also good. So, questions of staff. I want to know, first of all, we had a delegation saying that they came up with a different calculation for the number of points, and I'm just wondering if you could help us understand, how did you arrive at 50 points?
Through you, Madam Chair, using the policy itself, there are 5 categories that we look at. So obviously the first category, the roadway volume, it doesn't carry a significant volume of traffic to warrant any points in that category. In terms of transit destination, the closest transit route is about 400 meters, or transit station is about 400 meters away, so it gets 5 points for that. It gets 25 points for the high school itself. It gets 10 points for the location to Montgomery Park. It also completes a pedestrian link between the other piece of Fairmount Road, which is the piece that connects, generally speaking, to Montgomery and the park, and Sheldon Avenue itself. And it also scores another 5 points for the proximity to within 400 meters of a church. So when we're looking at the analysis, we're not, and part of the challenge might be taking a point along the street. So we look at the extent of the entire street where the sidewalk will be installed, and we measure 400 meters from that point. So doing that, that's where we come up with the total, which gets it to that priority 2 level.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, sir, you've had your chance to speak, and if you want to, at the council meeting, you can register as a delegation again, and you can contest it at that time. Thank you. Continue on.
And then I also wanted to ask about the mitigations for site-specific impacts. I'm wondering about some of the mature trees and specifically driveways. Can you tell us about what you've looked at so far, if there are indeed, if you have identified some of these problems and how you're going to mitigate them?
Through you, Madam Chair, there will be some driveway impacts, and so our consultant did do a review of that. But what we have found is that there are no driveways that will go from down to 1 parking space. Some will lose 1. But we're talking about some going from 3 to 2, 4 to 2, 5 to 4, that kind of thing. So there is nobody who will be down to 1 parking space in any of the impacts. To
tell us why, because some of the residents are saying, no, that's not the case. So are you looking at curb face sidewalk? Are you looking at widening some driveways, or?
Yeah, and through this analysis, through you, Madam Chair, the consultant took a presumed alignment for the sidewalk. This is a preliminary design that you have to keep in mind. It has a small boulevard, about 1.5 meters or a meter. So when the consultant laid out the parking arrangement for off-site or off-street parking, they used an average car length of 5.5 meters, plotted that through AutoCAD on the driveways to see how many cars would still fit with the sidewalk alignment that was planned. And as I said, there are a few properties that are affected, but the extent is moderate. I would say you're not seeing cars or driveways losing any more than 1 or 2 spaces, and never going down to one spot.
Okay. Mr. Cronkite, did you want to add something?
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. I think part of the challenge and part of the reason that the residents may feel that they're losing more space than they actually are is because the roadway has been surveyed. So the lines that they see and the stakes that they see on their property is the extent of the survey limits rather than the location of the sidewalk itself. One of the things that we do when we're working with the consultant is we are very cognizant of the fact that we're impacting a mature neighborhood, so we try to limit those impacts as much as possible. So the majority of the time we're not looking at installing the sidewalk right at the back edge of the property line.
I didn't really hear the end of what you said there.
You can just leave your mic on, Barry.
So when we survey, we survey the extent of the right-of-way. So that dictates where the property line is, but we don't necessarily install the sidewalk right on the property line. Generally speaking, to mitigate concerns, we move the installation of the sidewalk away from that line as much as possible.
Okay. I'm out of time, so I'll cue back in.
Councillor Gazzola?
They mentioned about the 25 points for the high school. Is it a question of you get 25 points, or is there, can you get 5 points, or how does that work?
Through you, Madam Chair, it's a sliding scale when we talk about schools. For 25 points, it's being within 800 meters of a high school. If it were within 1.6 kilometers of a high school, for example, it would be worth 12 points, whereas if it were within 3.2, it would be worth 6. So it's a sliding scale.
Does it have anything to do with the number of high school students in the area or using the road?
The priority ranking isn't defined by the number of pedestrians that are in the area, but by the number, or by the expectation of pedestrians. So while it may be a very mature neighborhood now, there is going to be a gentrification at some point which will bring in a younger generation and will in fact generate more pedestrians at some point, and we have to keep in mind that we're not building a piece of infrastructure here for tomorrow, but rather for 20 and 30 years from now.
I asked this the last time we were here. Are they putting in services other than sidewalks?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, this is a full reconstruction, so all sanitary, storm and water is going to be replaced. Yeah.
But what is the cost of the sidewalk portion of that? If you go back to where the way it is now, or if you want to cut properties down and do things, what's the cost of that, including whatever other stones and rocks you have to move?
We estimate the cost of the sidewalk would be about $65,000.
To put in the sidewalk?
Correct.
That nobody wants. Thank you.
Councillor Fernandez?
Thank you. I'm looking at the number of trees that are lost, and that's 24 houses on the street. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
There's 24 houses on Fairmont. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And there's 20 trees that are slated to be removed?
Through you, Madam Chair, as the report states, there's about 8 that will be affected. Just to characterize the tree loss, I would say most of it is small stature trees. As Ms. Holmes pointed out, I think that would be the largest impact, the one in front of her property at 65, which is a fairly mature Norway maple. But other than that, the other trees that are to be removed are fairly small and would not be much bigger than the ones that we're going to replace.
So could you define small for me? Would you say it's under 10 feet or over 10 feet?
Small to me would probably about 10 to 12 feet.
Okay. And all of the trees, you're saying 8 trees would have to be removed, including the Norway. There's no way that we could go around this large stature tree.
Through you, Madam Chair, trees, of course, are not an exact science. The proposed alignment of the sidewalk would put it through the root zone of this Norway maple, so we cannot guarantee that we'll save it. So we like to err on the side of being a little bit more cautious and saying it probably will not be saved.
And the impact to landscaping, the number on the report says 16. Is that an accurate reflection of the number of landscape areas that would be affected?
So those are not properties that are affected, but people who have cited that they think landscaping is a concern.
So, okay, but thank you for the clarification. Nevertheless, 16 people of 24 believe that their landscaping is going to be impacted by the sidewalk in the survey.
Through you, Madam Chair, 16 people that responded to the survey did indicate that impacts to landscaping were a concern. That doesn't necessarily mean that those 16 people were on the street, but that's 16 people that responded to the overall survey.
Overall survey, okay. Have we looked at, and it's not my favorite, because I've seen it on Old Mill and it doesn't work very well, to be quite honest with you, is curb face sidewalk on this site, on one side. Has that ever been discussed as an option?
Through you, Madam Chair, we have looked at preliminary options like that. We don't feel that a curb face sidewalk would eliminate any of these impacts to a great deal.
Okay. If I'm looking at the map, and my understanding is that there's a sidewalk on Sheldon, where if we're saying that Fairmont is south of Sheldon, there's a sidewalk on Sheldon that goes all the way to the end where it bumps up against the Conestoga Expressway. Is that correct? Okay. And the same thing with Jackson. There's a sidewalk all the way along until it comes to the Montgomery Park. Is that? And
that I'm not entirely sure of.
You're not?
In terms of Jackson Avenue, I can't speak to that conclusively.
Okay. And Clive Road has no sidewalks either?
Clive Road, only from Fairmont to Montgomery, has no sidewalks.
Okay. All right. I look at this small street, and to be quite frank, I don't see the routing, the walking routing that you're talking about. I mean, I know I went to Eastwood Collegiate a long time ago, but I knew kids that came from that area. It's concerning to me that we're putting a sidewalk in on such a small street that really is not a connecting street. It just happens to be running in the middle between some connecting streets that are important. I'm not going to support this. I just don't feel comfortable at all with the impacts on the neighborhood.
Okay, there's only Councillor Marsh who has a follow-up question, so I'm just going to ask one quick question. And I don't think we've done this in the past, but there seems to be some concern that may be alleviated if we were to go out and spray paint where the actual sidewalk would go. And luckily, we have 2 weeks before council. Is that something that we would be able to do, or is that not something we would? I know we don't typically do it, but it just seems that the residents seem to think they're going to lose less than what we think they're going to lose from a technical perspective.
Certainly, if directed by council, we could take that measure, yeah.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Marsh.
Thanks. So if we do go with that route, then do we need a motion of council?
Yeah, you probably would need to give that direction.
All right, so I'd like to move, well, I mean, you moved it, but...
I can't move
whatever.
it.
That's right, so I will move it, that we defer the decision to the council meeting on June 11th, and in the meantime, that staff go out. I also would like to organize a meeting date that would be amenable to staff's time, but also the majority of neighbors who are interested, so that we could look at the factors that are causing such great concern and see how they might be mitigated. I think through discussion we might come to some better understanding between all parties. So I also had a couple questions before I had that motion. Do you need me to write that down, clerk? That we just defer the decision? Or no?
I think
yes?
You probably don't need to for deferral of the decision, but for the requests of staff, I think you probably do. Is that right? Or did you capture it all?
Through the chair, I believe I've captured the concept of the deferral at this time. I can also review the wording with Councillor Marsh after the meeting, but
so that's fine.
Until the June
okay.
council meeting.
Okay. And then, will the preliminary design that you're working with be available for the residents to look at?
Through you, Madam Chair, we can work on a preliminary design. We are at a very high level for the design right now. We have concepts, and we have obviously a location for the sidewalk that we think is going to work. But in terms of a design to present to the public, we don't have anything right now. But we could get something ready for residents to review. Yeah.
Well, I guess I wouldn't want to put additional pressures on staff to come up with something in such a short turnaround time. Do we need to make this decision in 2 weeks? Should we defer the decision until such time that staff can show us a preliminary design?
Through the chair, yeah, we can get that done and have it still meet the June 11th council meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And has staff already discussed some of the concerns with residents so far? Has staff heard from residents about these concerns as yet?
Through you, Madam Chair, we have spoken to a handful of residents that have called either myself or my staff directly. Some of those conversations, they were a result of providing the report, so we talked a little bit about the challenges and that sort of thing. Okay.
And I guess I just have one more question. It's about the 520 surveys that went out. So I appreciate the geographic nature of this area and that I see why staff chose to have all the arterial roads and the border of the expressway there, but is that something that we typically would do? Is this a higher than usual number of surveys? Or?
Through you, Madam Chair, no, this isn't a higher number than usual. We, in the policy, had indicated that in order to adequately represent the neighborhood that we would circulate residents within a 400-meter radius. It just so happens that the arterial network here falls almost to that 400-meter radius. Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Thank you. Those are all my questions.
There are no further questions then, so it's up to you, Councillor Marsh. We can deal with the other two sections first if you want a minute.
To defer the decision?
Yeah. Okay, so you're ready to deal with that. So you're deferring the decision until the June 11th meeting, but you're asking also for direction to staff that they have a meeting with the residents. Is that what you're asking? and you're directing them to spray paint where the sidewalk would go? I know, but we need to give them formal direction to do that. So those are the three parts, I guess, to your motion. Is that correct? Yes. Okay. Are there any comments? Seeing none, all in favor? We're just dealing with recorded vote. Okay, we'll have to do them all separately then because of the one conflict. So a recorded vote to defer the decision for Fairmont Road. Those in favor? Those opposed? That carries. So basically, we didn't make a decision today. We're going to save our decision until June the 11th, and you're going to work with Councillor Marsh and staff over the next 2 weeks. Okay? Sorry? May I ask a question? Not right now, but you can talk to Councillor Marsh. Okay, so we also have two other items within that same report. So let's deal with Mauser Avenue. Councillor Singh has a noted conflict. I don't see any questions. I'm assuming there's no comments. So those in favor? Oh, recorded vote, sorry. Okay, voting's open. Has anyone else been hearing that ringing all afternoon? Okay. Whew. It's not just me. Oh, okay. Those in favor? Those opposed? And the one conflict noted. And then we will deal with the Centerville neighborhood, the entire 5 streets. Those in favor? Those opposed? That's carried. Okay, that went a little quicker than I thought it was, which is good. So now we will move to the item that we added for the Regional Transportation Master Plan update. And Jeffrey. Thank you for waiting and for your patience.
Thank you. Just looking to see about the... Great, thank you very much. And I guess I just use this to advance slides. So thank you very much. My name is Jeff Keyworth. I'm the Acting Manager of Transportation Planning at the Region of Waterloo. And today I'll be presenting to yourselves, Kitchener City Council, regarding the Regional Transportation Master Plan update, which is called Moving Forward. So it's a high-level summary presentation of a project which has been going on for over 2 years. I will deliver it fairly quickly, and then feel free to ask questions. I'm just going to read sort of prepared remarks. This is to ensure that all the area municipal councils sort of have the same message. So if you'll indulge me while I sort of read this. So the region is updating its transportation master plan called Moving Forward. Transportation master plan defines how the region's transportation system will grow and change in the coming decades. These plans consider high-level transportation needs in a strategic manner. And this update to the previous 2010 Regional Transportation Master Plan is for a 23-year period to 2041. So that's our horizon year. And is being led by a project steering committee that includes members of regional council and senior staff. This project was also coordinated with Moving Cambridge, which is the development of the city's first transportation master plan. So there was a coordination aspect with one of our other area municipalities. Population in Waterloo Region is growing, but not as rapidly as the forecast included in the provincial growth plan. Trends observed over the past 20 years suggest that travel is still dominated by private cars, despite significant investments in public transit that have succeeded in growing ridership. Global changes on the horizon outside of regional control, such as population growing older, new technologies like automated and electric vehicles, and changes to society such as online commerce and the sharing economy mean that transportation could change significantly in the coming decades. Through public consultation for moving forward, which included a stakeholder panel that included City of Kitchener staff, the Project Steering Committee heard there is a need for a well-integrated transportation network that would provide sustainable, healthy transportation choices while supporting the economy. The Project Steering Committee developed the following vision for transportation to guide this project. I'll just read it to you. Waterloo Region will be a prosperous, sustainable, and healthy community with viable transportation choices for people of all ages and abilities, and for the goods supporting our economy. To realize the vision, the Project Steering Committee confirmed the goals from the previous 2010 Regional Transportation Master Plan. Those goals are optimize the transportation system, promote transportation choice, foster a strong economy, and support sustainable development. The Project Steering Committee developed and evaluated 3 scenarios, or ways of achieving the goals. So scenario 1, we've called it Continue and Extend the 2010 Regional Transportation Master Plan. Basically what this is it's extending the existing strategy. So this is what we're doing. We're doing this right now. So it would extend that strategy, and that strategy is a transit-oriented network with strategic road improvements. The second scenario is invest more heavily in transit and active transportation. So basically this means that over and above Scenario 1, we would make extensive new investments in public transit as well as walking and cycling. And Scenario 3 is called Invest in a New Mobility Future with Advanced Transportation Technologies. So essentially this would be harnessing the potential of new transportation technologies such as driverless cars. Now Scenario 3 was removed from consideration as an overall regional direction because there is too much uncertainty surrounding emerging transportation technologies. So in other words, we're not proposing to do solve all of our problems through advanced technology. After evaluating scenarios 1 and 2 with a framework based on the 4 goals, the Project Steering Committee could find no clear winner because each scenario performed well in different aspects. The Project Steering Committee selected scenario 1, in other words, extending what we're currently doing, on the basis that it was a strong, well-balanced plan that would benefit from some adjustments to take advantage of higher performing aspects of Scenario 2. So in other words, we're proposing a hybrid approach. Although Scenario 3 was not carried forward, staff continue to actively explore new mobility opportunities as part of the recommended plan for moving forward. I'd like to take a few minutes to talk about barriers. So the draft recommended plan builds on the findings of surveys of the general public that found strong interest in public transit, walking, and cycling, but there were barriers to using those modes. So this is when we asked people, what is keeping you from doing more walking, cycling, or public transit? What are your barriers? And so the barriers they mentioned were it takes too long to get between destinations, and that was for public transit, cycling, and walking, so all 3 modes. Safety concerns, that was primarily for cycling. And does not meet my schedule needs or requires too many connections, that was primarily for public transit. So as the above barriers to walking, cycling, and public transit were cited by the interested but concerned group, that comprises at least half of the population, so that's the yellow on those pie charts there. The recommended plan must explicitly try to address those above barriers in order to be successful at encouraging more use of sustainable transportation. In other words, we can't expect people to get out of their cars unless we address those barriers that people cite to getting out of their cars. So I'll just spend a few minutes on the actual recommendations of the plan. In terms of active transportation, the recommendations generally involve updating and incorporating the active transportation master plan that we completed in 2014. This would be done by identifying opportunities, enhancing the network and separation from motor vehicles, and enabling children to travel by themselves to school. In terms of public transit, the recommendations are organized around a principle of developing a frequent transit network. So that means that there should be, ideally on this network, there should be a bus every 10 minutes or less, 7 days a week, late into the evening. This builds generally on the recently approved GRT business plan and identifying future rapid transit corridors. In terms of interregional transportation and goods movement, the recommendations are aimed at enhancing interregional connections to support economic growth. And basically this means supporting high-speed rail, enhancements to GO Rail and bus, as well as managed lanes on provincial highways. The recommendations for roads are organized around a principle of building a transportation network that supports all modes of travel. Sometimes this is called complete streets. We're choosing not to call it that, but essentially what this means is that all modes can travel on those roads. And this includes a strategic road expansion program targeted at relieving traffic congestion or enabling development. Finally, around new mobility, while there is considerable uncertainty around new transportation technologies, the recommendations in this area are organized around a principle of preparing the region for new mobility. Because it is likely these technologies will be a significant factor of daily life by 2041, if not sooner. So we are looking at things such as potentially subsidized ride-hailing to areas not served by public transit. So it's an alternative form of delivering public transit service. We're also looking at driverless ride-hailing pilot programs. There's a variety of different things that you can do. So we're sort of exploring them, but we're not recommending that we take a concrete, like that we start, wholesale conversion at this time. So just a few slides on specific recommendations for Kitchener. This is the Regional Roads Expansion Program focusing on the City of Kitchener. So there's a list of roads that we expect to widen before 2041. It's a little small, so but there's a lot of roads. Basically, just read them off to you. So Fisher-Hellman Road, Highland Road, Bleems Road, a portion of Trusler Road, the River Road extension and Fairway Road. So all these ones that we're proposing to widen would be to 4 lanes. We wouldn't widen beyond, we're not proposing 6-lane roads. Projects in green would be completed before 2031, so sometime within the next 12, 13 years. Projects in purple would be completed in the 2031 to 2041 timeframe, so sometime in the decade after that. In addition to this road construction, the region would improve regional intersections as needed to support development and/or to manage traffic congestion. Now finally, I'm showing here the regional transit network, again sort of focusing on the City of Kitchener. So here in this map you can see the ION corridor in blue, as well as the light blue, which is the extension to Cambridge, and then the existing I-Express lines shown in red. So basically we're proposing to extend ION Light Rail to Cambridge, which involves, as you know, a portion of Kitchener as well. So that's the light blue line. We're also suggesting to implement further I-Express lines along Ottawa Street, which has just started actually, Block Line Road and Homer Watson Boulevard. So those are the yellow lines that you see on the map. And then finally, we're advocating support for high-speed rail to the Kitchener hub and also rail service to the airport south of the Breslau GO stations. That's the dotted green line just on the very right edge of the map, heading down and disappearing off the map. So that's technically in the township of Woolwich. Also, we'll start planning for future rapid transit lines. So that on the map is the dashed yellow and red lines. There you see 2 of them. One of them is potentially along Victoria Street or Highland Road in the west, and then merging in downtown Kitchener somehow, and then continuing east along Victoria Street. The other candidate that we suggest is a good one is in City of Waterloo. Thank you very much for your listening and your attention, and please give me your questions for Regional Council.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Mayor Verbanevik.
Thank you, and thanks for coming in. I realize I'll get a kick at the cat at Regional Council, but I think there is one that I know is of interest to our council here, and it has to do in particular with the issue of cycling and this notion of creating a minimum grid. And so I guess my question to you is, does this strategy have in it the clear direction the regional staff needs to work with city staff in order to move this forward in a timely manner? Because I think the feeling, there's a level of frustration in the cycling community that's not happening, and a lot of
A lot of it has to do with regional roads, and so the question is, does this, does the document that you're bringing forward give that clear indication?
Thank you for the question. Through you, Madam Chair. The recommendations in the active transportation section, there are two which are directly related to that. So the public comment on needing a well-integrated network talks directly to the fact that sometimes regional roads or provincial highways are barriers to active transportation, either because the facilities are challenging to get across or because the intersections may not provide the level of user comfort that users are looking for. So there is certainly enhanced direction, I think, in the master plan to pursue those improvements to those crossing points and also those intersections. In addition, we are actively looking at increasing the separation for motor vehicle traffic on as many regional roads as possible, and we have a budget item in the funding to, we call it upgrades to cycling facilities, basically. So we're looking to identify existing or planned conventional bike lanes and seeing what the opportunity is to enhance that to a separated facility.
So to be clear then, the document does give regional staff the direction they need to work with city staff in a timely manner on this? Just to be really clear.
I believe that it does. Now, that being said, I mean, there's still a requirement for regional staff to apply, appropriately regional guidelines with respect to locations that require treatments. So there are always differences of opinion sometimes about how the facilities are to be best managed, but we'll certainly continue to collaborate with City of Kitchener staff on all locations.
Okay. Well, I guess I would just say from a Kitchener perspective, I think that's a priority for us, and I'll speak to it at Regional Council tomorrow. Thanks.
Councillor Fernandez.
Thank you. Could you go back a couple of slides to the roads you were going to there? That's the road widenings. So you're talking about road widening on Ferry Road. So what area is that you're speaking about?
Well, that's a previously identified road widening between Lackner Boulevard and roughly to River Road, essentially. Okay. That stretch there. There's, I believe that the actual stretch for widening itself is Lackner to Old Chicopee. Beyond or further to the west of Old Chicopee, there is a 4-lane cross-section, but it's lacking turning lanes, for example, at River Road, which affects the traffic capacity on that.
Yeah, and that's why I was hoping that that's what the one you were talking about, because it is the traffic now coming from sort of the Lackner area down River Road towards, down Ferry Road towards River Road, and then further beyond. The signaling is appalling there. I mean, I travel that once a week at least, and to make a left-hand turn is really bad. So maybe we could start with some signal changes at that intersection. I think that might be helpful before we start doing the road widenings. The other one I was thinking about was Bleems Road, and yeah, I can see exactly where you're probably thinking is out towards Trussler. The road widening, is that the area you're considering? From Strasbourg to Trussler?
Through you, Madam Chair. So just one further point on Fairway Road.
Oh, sorry.
We have actually initiated the environmental assessment for the widening, so we are currently looking at the improvements. It's already underway. The study is already underway.
Okay.
In the case of Bleems Road, the stretch of Bleems Road there is between Strasbourg Road and Fisher-Hallman Road. We are not proposing, we don't see the need to widen Bleems Road further to the west between Fisher-Hallman and Trussler Road. We have had some correspondence from the Home Builders Association, who have emphasized that they are, that they're developing that area, and so they feel they see the need to widen the road. Our modeling does not suggest that is actually required, that we feel that it would be preferable to leave it as a 2-lane road with appropriate intersection treatments.
Okay. I'm puzzled about that, because I think the development is going to explode out there too, and it's kind of a windy country road from that stretch, really, from Fisher-Hallman to Trussler. But I think that's vitally important to take a look at how that builds out, that we're not ending up expropriating land backyards or something like that if you're widening, if you're widening that piece of Bleams Road. There was one other question I had. I'll let somebody else ask it. It may come back to me. Thank you.
Councillor Davey?
Thank you. Just in terms of feedback, I'll be honest, I was a little disappointed to see that the future emerging technologies was sort of left off. I understand you can't really plan for technologies that don't exist yet, but my question would be, or my suggestion going back would be that even if it's sort of left off the table at this point, it's an issue that you're going to have to face and tackle at some point, because I do think autonomous vehicles are going to come a fair bit quicker than 2041. And the region's going to have a lot of challenges in terms of how do they deal with, for me, the ideal transportation scenario is an autonomous 8-ish vehicle pulls up to my house and takes me where I want to go, right? So the region's going to have to grapple with challenges in terms of how's that fit in with the taxi industry or the private sector and that as well. And I think my preference, of course, would be that it's a public domain that handles these sorts of things, but that's something I think the region's going to have to start thinking about and how they're going to handle that.
Through you, Madam Chair, I realize there was no specific question, but if I may respond to the comment, we do feel sort of regionally that because of the uncertainty around the technology right now, there isn't anyone necessarily who knows sort of what technologies will develop, how quickly they will develop, and sort of certainly what the impacts of those technologies will be. That being said, it's still early days in the revolution, if you like, to call it that. Our feeling is that it's actually less of a technology question and actually more of a community policy and community forum question. The history of the private car has been that the urban forum was influenced by the technology, and the policies and vision at the time did not exist or were superseded by the power of the technology. And so from that point of view, our feeling from a staff point of view is that it's more valuable to focus on questions of what community forum we desire, and also establishing the policies around that community forum so that we are able to push back when appropriate against the technology, because there are significant risks that we feel is important to mitigate, and so that essentially that way we achieve the community that we want locally, as opposed to the technology imposing its direction on us.
Sorry, thank you. Just one follow-up question then. So, and maybe you don't have an answer to this, but what is the region's actual jurisdiction then? If the technology was granular enough that it could be individual transportation, is that under the region's jurisdiction to handle, or is it purely a mass sort of transit jurisdiction?
So through you, Madam Chair, so the region's jurisdiction, I mean, it's a very wide-ranging question, I guess, and so it's not easily answerable, but certainly the region's interest is in supporting Grand River Transit, and so to the extent that some folks have written about the challenges of operating a transit system in the face of currently Uber, let's say, but also in the future these autonomous vehicles. And so our interest is in retaining or strengthening Grand River Transit, so we have to look at ways of leveraging the investment so that it improves ridership, not necessarily a detriment to it. There are also other things that can be done. Just throwing out ideas here, essentially, because that's where we're at right now. It's very much a blue sky exercise, but a group of companies, some folks have published a really interesting document, sort of a autonomous vehicle manifesto, if you want to call it that, where policies and ideas around supporting the technology. One of which is that electric autonomous vehicles should be shared vehicles. So they should not have single individuals being ferried to and from. They should have 2, 3, 4 people riding in them at all times. Otherwise, we will see massive inefficiencies. And so there are ways potentially to limit the use of lanes electronically, such that if the vehicle is empty or if it only has a single person in it, they may get less preferential treatment. You could reserve road space for high occupancy vehicles, for example, such as buses or cars that have 3+ occupants. So there are different ways of doing that, but it would impose, basically it's a trade-off between performance for some and penalties for others, but there are costs and there's actually, it's a huge area, so I can't really answer it in 5 minutes, but I mean, it's kind of that sort of thing.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you kindly.
Councillor Marsh?
Thank you. I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name.
Just Jeff.
Jeff.
Your last name?
Jeff Keyworth.
Keyworth. Hi, Mr. Keyworth. So I apologize for having to miss most of your presentation, but I did get a chance ahead of time to look at just the agenda for the planning and works, and I'm just, is it that you are trying to recommend that Regional Council approve just a sort of a continuation of the plan that was built in 2010? Am I understanding correctly?
Through you, Madam Chair, so that is correct. The overall philosophy of the Regional Transportation Master Plan, as adopted in 2010, which was the overall philosophy of that plan, was a transit-oriented network with strategic road improvements. And we are, with some tweaks, I guess I would say, we are largely recommending to support that direction.
And so, is it the regional staff's opinion that this plan that was approved in 2010 has actually been successfully implemented between then and now in 2018 so far? I mean, are you transit-oriented, and are you cycling-friendly and pedestrian-friendly? Like, what I'm trying to understand is the difference between the strategic plan and the implementation. And is there a difference in your opinion?
So through you, Madam Chair, there were a list of action items that regional staff gave to themselves in the 2010 plan. And almost all of those actions were completed or are actively underway. So I think from the point of view of actually accomplishing what staff set out for themselves, that was largely accomplished. That being said, I mean, there's always room for improvement. And so as an example, we, in terms of growing transit ridership, we were successful to grow transit ridership for many, many years until downturn that's been experienced in other municipalities as well. We hit our 2016 transit ridership target in 2012, I believe, so we were ahead of schedule. That has since come off a little bit. There's been a bit of a drop in ridership, but that seems to have stabilized now that the detours to transit for ION construction have ended, as well as the other decisions locally which have affected ridership. So we appear to be growing that again. I don't know, we've completed a cycling master plan, and so, or an active transportation master plan, so we are proceeding along down the path of improving active transportation as well. So I think largely, I would say we have largely been successful with the tasks that we have set for ourselves.
Okay. So then this moving forward plan is not incorporating the active transportation master plan, or is it?
Through you, Madam Chair, it is incorporating the active transportation master plan.
And so is there a plan to infill sidewalks in some of the areas where there are no sidewalks on regional roads, such as Victoria Street, out near I guess Lackner and towards downtown? There are many stretches there where there aren't any sidewalks. Do you know offhand if there's any plans for that?
So again, through you, Madam Chair, there is there's about $50 million recommended in the current plan for the next until 2031 to implement infill cycling and walking infrastructure. There is a requirement to prioritize those improvements to, I mean, there's a lot of areas which don't have it, but we certainly have the previous plan, the 2014 active transportation master plan did include a set of priorities for infill, and so we are reviewing that to make sure that it's still valid, but that's likely how we will prioritize the spending of the funds.
Great. I like that you're looking to have more dedicated cycling routes. That's my understanding of what you said earlier. I think that is something that City of Kitchener residents have been waiting for, and sidewalks. We just dealt with the question of should we put sidewalks on a road that's barely used by anybody other than the people who live on that street. But we're seriously considering it as a city because we're looking to have accessibility throughout the city. But what I'm trying to understand is why wouldn't the region really try to focus on having sidewalks on the very well traveled routes? And so I'm glad to hear that is a plan, and I would encourage Regional Council to prioritize that even more than it already has.
Okay, I'm going to ask just a couple questions before I get back to Councillor Fernandez. Within this plan, I'm going to get into maybe some of the more details. Did it contemplate getting into new subdivisions earlier than it currently does, like closer to the 2-year time frame from when the first house is built? Is it contemplated at all in there?
So in response to your question, we don't have specific recommendations about accelerating transit accommodation of new subdivisions. That's an item that we continuously look at, and through the Grand River Transit Business Plan, sort of the pace of investment that was envisioned in that plan is being carried forward. So it's a bit of not trying to give you a vague answer, but essentially that's what the recommendations of our master plan are in line with the Grand River Transit Business Plan.
I guess I would encourage you to strengthen it within the master plan to try and get transit in newer subdivisions quicker, just because I think it would help residents use transit more often as opposed to having to purchase a car for some of the newer subdivisions that are out in the suburbs, especially of Kitchener. The other thing I wanted to ask, you were talking, I don't remember the exact word on one of the slides, but the feeder buses into the Ion. I don't know if that's what you called it, that one there. So you have Victoria, you said Victoria Street or Highland. Is it one or the other, or is it both?
So yeah, that's this actually rapid transit proposed rapid transit line. So it's not feeder buses so much as it would be. We haven't picked a technology, but it might be another iteration of a light rail or potentially a bus rapid transit or something like that. So we're not interested in identifying the technology. What the exercise that was done here was to look at areas where the ridership potential is strong and that would complement the stage 1 and stage 2 network. So this would be, like, you might want to call it like a stage 3 Ion. That would be essentially what we're looking at. So in terms of both Highland and Victoria in the west were both strong candidates. We would pick one of them.
Right. Okay. My thought was Ottawa Street to add it as a possibility, and I say that just because the population is only going to continue to grow and feed it into the Cortland station, just because then it gets more of the southwest side. So that's just a thought I throw out there, not necessarily that you have to answer any data or details. Also, does the master plan look at or mention at all another 401 connection?
So it does not. We are supporting the direction of the 2010 plan, which looked at improving the access to Cedar Creek. Don't know if it's showing on here or not.
Probably not.
It's just off the map, unfortunately, so I don't know if I have a pointer. Let's see. I do have a pointer, but you probably can't see it that far. So within the township of North Dumfries, beyond New Dundee Road, the previous plan and this plan as well have an extension of Fisher-Hallman Road and a realignment around Roseville to improve the connection to Cedar Creek Road. So the ministry is actually completing a study to enhance the design of the Cedar Creek Road interchange to improve the capacity of that interchange. And when we did surveys following the 2010 plan of folks traveling in that area, the strongest interest was actually at the Cedar Creek Road interchange, not at the other candidate locations that we studied. So that sort of supported the conclusions of that plan. So we are retaining that design. We have deferred that project to the later decade. So in the previous plan, it was recommended to be constructed before 2031, and we are now recommending that it be constructed sometime in the 2031 to 2041 timeframe.
I'm starting to get more and more concerned at what I'm hearing from you, because the anticipated growth that we're supposed to expect in the southwest end, or even just entire south of Kitchener, is going to be phenomenal over the next number of years, and I'm talking probably before 2041, including what was already brought up by Councillor Fernandez with regards to Bleems Road and not having a widening from Fisher-Hallman to Trustler. It's fine now, but it's a rural cross-section. There's no sidewalks, there's minimal lighting, and as we're going to be bringing in tens of thousands of people into that area, it's going to make a huge impact on that road, and this plan is to go to 2041. So I'm seriously concerned that there's no plan before 2041 to have a widening of Bleams Road from Fisher Home into Tressler, and I'm concerned that it's not putting more emphasis on, even if it is the Cedar Creek 401 connection, to improve it, because we are going to see a lot more residents in that area, and so that's quite concerning to me, and that's why I also think the feeder, I call it the feeder bus, but if you want to call it the phase 3 of the ION, I see something having to be a little bit more west of, or southwest or south of where you're currently speaking of. So I'm strongly advocating for you to, and the mayor, to encourage some of that in this plan going forward.
If I may just respond to that,
Sure.
We aren't looking at widening Bleams Road, but that doesn't mean that we aren't going to be modifying the cross-section. So this plan is looking at simply at the expansion program, not at the reconstruction and rehabilitation program. So that stretch of Bleams Road is going to be getting an urban modification with sidewalks, roundabouts at some of the key intersections, so that traffic capacity of that road will be, and the comfort for other modes will be considerably enhanced, even if we aren't physically widening the number of lanes.
Yeah, I still do think you're widening Tressler up to Bleams. You're widening Fisher Home, and you're widening the other part of Bleams. So why aren't you doing that section in between? So I do have concerns even with it, not now, but it doesn't need it now, but I see it needing it in the next 10, 15 years. So those are my thoughts, but I appreciate where you're coming from. Councillor Fernandez?
Sorry, just one quick question. River Road, I know that there's been discussions around the River Road extension related to the ION as well. So do you have a timeline for the River Road extension yet? Is it definitive, or are you still in the site design phase?
Let me just get the timing of River Road extension. It's got it in my plan here. So the current timing of the River Road extension, where are you? There's not that many $70 million projects. So sorry, just one moment. I've got to go through my capital program here.
I think somebody wants to give you a hand behind you.
There it is. Thank you. Thanks, Tabit. Oh, by the way, my assistant PM, Tabit and Emmy. Thanks for coming. So we're doing some new construction in 2020, which is some of the extension between Manitou and Wilson, I believe. And then a large amount of construction will be in 2022. So that's the current schedule of the River Road extension. So we are doing detailed design work right now, as well as starting in on utility relocation. So there's for a large project of that nature, there is a lot of advanced work that has to be done, which sort of contributes to the extended timeframes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. That's all the questions that we have from you. We appreciate you taking the time to come in and present this to us.
Thank you.
Thank you. With that, I think we're adjourned. Sure.